struggling to stay in the water. And I was like, I've got to stay here.
Mm.
My only memory is that it's like this crystal clear memory that will never leave me because it was peace.
Mm-hmm.
I could have died there, but I had no fear because there was no knowledge that water could harm me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need to breathe. My eyes were wide open. I could see clearly. And to be honest, that was one of my earliest memories of feeling good about life. And then someone came and took that away from me by diving into the water and dragging me out.
Hi, I'm really glad you're listening to my show, Growth Factor. I'm Amalia, and I'm going to ask you right now, please share this with everyone because Pablo Kelly, who you're looking at right now, has an incredible story. He was given 6 to 8 months to live with GBM, that's Glioblastoma Multiforme. And most people live maybe as much as 15 months. And he's going to tell you how long it's been and his journey. Pablo, can you tell us your first diagnosis and your thoughts about that?
Okay, so what was it? I sorted my life out after having a bit of a rough childhood where I was doing drugs, partying all the time, being afraid to be myself around people. I had to use something else to create that kind of ego identity. But so basically, I got rid of all my toxic relationships. I stopped doing drugs, and I met the woman I'm now married to, Rebecca. And basically, I learned to love myself, and I fell in love. And we spent about 2 years together. We started to talk about having children. I got a steady paid job for the first time in my life. And basically, I was working in a garden center, and it was midsummer, and I started to have these, like a click. One day I got a click in my neck, and I felt like I was spinning around. There's a sense of vertigo, and my arm felt a bit weird. Then about 2 weeks later, after talking to a doctor, they said it's migrainosaurus. About two weeks later, I had another clicking, and I got the same thing. And I said, I'm a bit concerned. And they said, well, take some painkillers, etc. And then one day I finished work and I went to meet my girlfriend. I went through this old country lane. I had to run because some cars were coming. And after running, I went to take a drink of water and I felt a click in my neck again. And I thought I was having a stroke because my mouth sagged, my arm stopped working on my left side, and I got really concerned then. So I went to my doctors the next day. I said, I'm very concerned and I would like to get a CT scan because I've done a bit of research. And he said, okay, I'll book it in. And about 2 weeks later, I had the CT scan. So, I mean, it's taking a long time to get to the point where I got diagnosed. But
no,
so I had the CT
just
scan,
go.
6 hours long, at the wait to have that diagnosed. And the radiographer came back and he said, it's just you look fine. There's just a shady patch in your brain. We don't know if it's anything serious. It's probably just a migrainosaurus. So basically, I went home. I went back to work, and I was suffering. I actually ended up missing quite a bit of work because I was having big headaches. Almost lost my job. And then they basically called me up. I was getting prepared to attend my sister's wedding. So we were going shopping a lot, which was quite tiring in itself. I was feeling very fatigued. And I got a call out of the blue one day from the same guy. And he said, Pablo, we think it might be a tumor. You're going to have to come in for an MRI scan. So I went for the MRI, and they basically, about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, it was about a month later, they diagnosed me with, they said it's a tumor. It's definitely a tumor. We've at the borders looked at your scans, and we would like to do a biopsy. So 21st of September 2014, I had a biopsy where they removed a little tissue sample, and were able to diagnose GBM4. And yeah, that's that pretty much.
So I know a lot of people say GBM, but that's glioblastoma.
Yeah, glioblastoma multiforme. Yeah.
And you said basically they were saying it was a migraine. Is that the word, migraine?
Migrainosaura, yeah, migrainosaura, which I'd never heard of. I thought that's
migrainous aura, A-U-R-A.
Yeah, it's like an aura of a migraine.
Right
I was actually a vegetarian for the first 17 years of my life. When I left home at 17, I started to eat meat because it was the only option available to me. I lived with my uncle for a while, and he basically fed me and said, "You'll eat what I eat." Lots of Moroccan tagines and things, very tasty. But I was also still smoking cannabis and eating lots of processed foods. So pretty sure that was the reason, the cause of the sudden growth of my tumor. Maybe it was dormant because I had a big accident when I was younger where I fell on my head off a wall, like straight onto my head. Probably got concussed, but I never went to the doctors. I just kind of shook it off. I was quite young. So there's a number of factors that could cause a brain tumor, and most of it is stemmed from metabolic issues.
That's
so
interesting.
When I was younger, I was drinking a lot of soy milk, and I was having tofu and lots of soy-based meat products, which aren't meat. So yeah, I was just a bit chaotic, my diets. We were vegetarians. Yeah, my mom said that she was vegan when I was born.
So that means she was pregnant with you and lactating with you. She was giving you breast milk and she was vegan?
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you before we get into more about the cancer and how long it's been that you've been surviving, where most people don't even live 2 years with glioblastoma multiforme.
I was always lean. I never went above 10 stone. I don't know what that's in pounds, but yeah, I could never put on weight. I was quite lean, quite athletic.
And do you feel
because I'm kind of
fine?
semi-carnivore and keto, I can build muscle quite easily.
Okay. So no
I've actually had the most muscle I've ever had in my life when I went carnivore. So
okay. So tell us about that. Let's relate to, well, it talks about you talked about theory. So you were hit in the head. Also, was there any abuse? There's a reason I'm asking. Was there any abuse by anyone?
I got forced to smoke a cigarette at the age of 12. One of my so-called friends, I shoved a cigarette in my mouth and went, take a toke of that. And then I got instantly addicted and I would steal money to buy cigarettes. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I kind of it was a bit messed up. So there was a lot of trauma, and that's why I turned to cannabis, because I started secondary education. So I was like 12 years old, 11, 12. And all the people I met that I made friends with were smoking cannabis.
When did you stop cigarettes?
My mum found me smoking a cigarette and she told me off and said, you're not allowed out to play with anyone for about a year. So I came home and I went straight home and I stayed in the house, and she played some kind of Hindu music, and she'd make sure I was calm, collected, because I was very addicted. I was like, I need to go out. I was very angry, very upset. So yeah, I didn't actually stop smoking until I was 21.
Meaning marijuana?
All of it, cigarettes, marijuana. I was doing ecstasy, MDMA, cocaine, drinking lots of alcohol. It's just generally what my social group did.
So the reason I asked is you're the fourth person I've heard of with GBM. The other people didn't last long at all, not even maybe a year and a half. But all three of them I noticed came from abuse. One, the mother abused, one, the father abused. It all seemed to be.
No, I never actually experienced abuse. I was bullied a lot by people that I consider were supposed to be my friends, because I was totally different. I was introvert. I was kind. They were all like kind of general bloke kind of people, where they kind of take the mick out of each other, bully each other for fun. And I couldn't really take that. I went psycho. They called me psycho boy because I would fight back, and then they'd beat the shit out of me, literally, on my language. But so yeah, I was abused by the people that I considered friends, and eventually, obviously, I decided to change that, and then the cancer actually occurred.
It's interesting. You're the fourth person with that pattern, getting beaten, male getting beaten. That's just my own anecdotal observation. But my friend who lost her husband to glioblastoma multiforme came from abuse also, and you also fell on your head. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And I was also given a lot of amalgam fillings when I was young. They do a full body scan to see if there's cancer in the body. I've got a primary brain tumor, and they said you've got no subcutaneous fat, which I realize now was actually quite bad. It means my body was lacking the fat proteins to help my body sustain itself, the energy.
And what were you eating at the time for, let's say, 6 months to a year before that you had no fat?
Before I was diagnosed, it was generally pasta, bread, a little bit of meat, lots of sugar, confectionery.
Say 6 to 12 months prior to your diagnosis of GBM, were you mostly vegan?
I ended up having mumps. I had the mumps because I went to college, and that's where I met photography college, where I met Rebecca on the course. And because there was no bursaries or funding to help me, because I was a little bit older than all the other kids, and there was no funding for anyone who was an adult. So basically, I had no money. I was living well below my means. I was eating the cheapest food I could find. So it was highly processed. I ended up getting the mumps because my immune system was so suppressed. And then I had my first vaccine,
Do you mean first
which was
vaccine
the
ever?
MMR. First vaccine in my life, and then literally 2 years later, I got diagnosed with glioblastoma,
So
which
you
is
got,
another thing.
so
It's another
first you
factor.
got the mumps, then you got the vaccine for it?
I got the MMR, yeah, measles, mumps, and rubella.
I wonder why the
It was
doctor
because I was scared. I was in so much pain. I was
Yeah.
suffering so much. I couldn't afford to do anything but eat the crap food I was eating, and I was like, I've got to do something. But now I realize that was probably a mistake.
Wow. What's interesting too is usually if you get chickenpox, the doctor doesn't say, go get a chickenpox vaccine. If you got
Yeah.
measles, I'm assuming you will have some immunity toward it. Same thing with these new shots, this new virus. If
I mean,
someone
I
already,
had the measles when I was younger, and I never had a vaccine. I just got through it. But the mumps, I've never experienced something so painful. Both of my glands were swollen, like balloons.
wow, never heard anyone before that had mumps. Wow. So now you've had measles and mumps in your life. Anything else?
Yeah. Not really. I mean, I'm pretty strong in myself. So
And
yeah,
over
I
the,
mean, I had general colds all the time, headaches.
okay. And over the past 2-3 years, the new virus that's been haunting everyone, did you get it and how did you do?
I because they couldn't. They basically said because you're medically, sorry, what's the word?
Exempt?
Medically exempt because you are terminally ill. We can't give you the vaccine because we don't know what will happen. You know, they say that to people like my wife, she was pregnant at the time and she said, I'm not going to have it. And they wouldn't give it to a pregnant woman anyway, because they don't know what would happen to the child.
Okay. In America, they were giving it to pregnant lactating. They said it's safe. What's interesting is I used to work for Merck Pharmaceuticals. So when I'd wait for the doctor in the waiting room to tell them about our new medications we were promoting, it was headache, migraine medicines, cholesterol medicines, blood pressure, asthma, just everything with Merck Pharmaceuticals. I would read the prescribing information so I know what I'm talking about. It's that big map you get
Yeah.
and of information. And it always had contraindications. So when the new shots came out, I was asking doctors who were lung COVID specialists, what are the contraindications? Who is not good for it? Can you give it to pregnant lactating? And they didn't have any answers. They were just giving it to people, to everybody, thinking this is so healthy. But I knew from my experience that pills and shots always have some kind of side effect.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so when I went carnivore, when I stopped having vegetables and vegetable oils like olive oil, for the 3 years whilst I was doing full-on carnivore before my second awake craniotomy, I never got the cold, I never got the flu. My immune system was so strong that people will say, oh, you're terminally ill, you should be getting the cold, the flu. And I said, well, no, because I eat well. I ate the right foods for my body.
Are you saying you got the virus twice, this new virus? You've got it twice?
Basically, I got a bad cold at the beginning of the virus. I thought it was just the flu. We all had the flu, and it was like within 3 days, I was better. It wasn't that bad. I've had flus worse than that when I was younger. I was like, well, maybe I've had it, and now my immune system is strong enough to not have it again.
Can you teach us about oils when you're cooking? What oils do you believe in and not believe in? What should we use?
I use butter and tallow, so it's basically beef-based fats or suet. I use suet, put it in a pan, melt it down.
What is suet? What is tallow, and how do we get it?
Tallow is basically the product of suet. If you slowly heat up suet over time, the fat that comes out of that is like a clean kind of hard fat which sets. And it's nutrient dense fats, so it's like full of the good stuff.
What
DHL and
what animal do you get your suet and tallow from?
It's beef. Beef is the healthiest fat.
Okay. Well, we were raised in the 80s and 90s to believe that vegan, now they're calling it plant-based because they're marketing it different. They think vegan sounds too extreme. I was taught it. I mean, I'm basically a nutritionist by university, but they didn't allow minors at the time. So I don't have an official document from my university. Okay. I did it on another way, but we were taught basically carbs were healthy, grains, legumes, fruits, vegetables, smoothies, all that stuff is really healthy. And meat, don't have too much because you're going to get colon cancer, other cancers, you're going to have heart damage, stroke. What do you have to say about that?
I don't believe that at all. I believe the pyramid, the food pyramid should be flipped upside down. So animal fats and animal protein should be the biggest part of that. And carbohydrates, they're non-essential. your brain, your body doesn't need carbohydrates to live. I mean, when I was carnivore, strict carnivore for 3 years, having bone broth, I was having liver, and my body got all the nutrients it needed to be strong and healthy. And my tumor, which should be fast growing, for anyone who's doing chemotherapy and radiotherapy, they tend to have spurts of growth where it's suddenly like, oh, it's gotten worse. For me, for 3 years, no treatment, nothing. It was stable, completely stable. And they said we have to compare it over 2 years to see if there's any growth, which there was minute growth. And I wasn't doing supplements. I got off supplements. I was just being healthy. I was doing potato breathing. So I sorted out my breathing rather than mouth breathing and hyperventilating.
Tell us your story when you were first diagnosed. What did the doctors tell you to do? And what did you do? Traditional medicine
I wasn't
and
actually, they said, oh, we can offer you chemotherapy and radiotherapy. You can go after my biopsy. They said, go home and rest up, get better, and then we'll have a meeting to discuss your options. But I was actually booked in straight away without my knowledge to go in for a radiotherapy mask fitting. Have you heard about the ketogenic diets? He said, yeah, I've heard about it, but I don't think it's going to work. And I said, well, I'll take my chances. I said goodbye, and I hung up. And that was pretty much the end of my consultation with that woman, the oncologist, because I wasn't doing their treatments. I never actually saw her again. I was put into the surgical team. So my only contact with them was to call up and say, what's my MRI results, please?
Have you ever contacted them through email or phone to let them know?
Yeah, I've talked to, she's actually retired, the one I used to have. And then the one that took her place, she said, I'm going to take you off the oncology team because you don't need the treatment. You're doing so well. But the only contact and the only comments I've had from the surgeon who did my awake craniotomy is that you're very lucky. And I made a choice to work really hard to survive. And it wasn't luck, it was willpower, strength.
Yeah, taking your health into your own hands, they're calling it luck.
Yeah, and then I started doing ketogenic diet, and within the first 2 weeks, I was fat adapted. So my ketones were quite high. My glucose was quite low. So I was hitting the 1-to-1 ratio that Professor Thomas Seyfried suggests that we aim for. That's the perfect zone for healing, or stopping the tumor from growing.
What other books, professors, who else did you learn from? I had Professor Seyfried on my show, so you can click below and find him.
Yeah. There's a woman called Patricia Daly, an Irish lady who had cancer of the eye, and she had decided the ketogenic diet was the way to go, and she trained herself. She got training to be a nutritionist, and she wrote some recipe books. So I was on a restricted calorie ketogenic diet, which there was a charity in London called Matthew's Friends. And this is the charity that works with children with epilepsy, because children are more able to become in ketosis. So yeah, basically, I got in contact with them through the advice of someone who I miraculously, through word of mouth, through my grandma's and my mother's contact with a health food shop. It's a vegan health food shop. But they had a contact who had been doing ketogenic diet. She had a low-grade brain tumor, and she's actually survived it. She's outlived it using ketogenic diet. So I coincidentally, one day I was in the shop and I met her. Someone was like, that's the woman. Talk to that woman. She's the one you want to speak to.
Wow.
She can help you. And she directed me to this charity and said, they can provide you with the basics to understand what you're doing.
That's incredible, because my sister's she's probably about 50 right now. When she was 21, she had choroidal ciliary melanoma. That means a cancer in her eye. The first hospital said remove the eye and then your cancer's gone. But the doctor thankfully had such a horrible bedside manner that my dad started cussing at him for being so rude and disrespectful. So we looked into alternatives. My sister still has her eye. We went to a hospital in Philadelphia that removes eye tumors. So I'm definitely going to look into that woman and see what she did. I wonder if she took out the tumor.
Patricia Daly is an amazing woman. She provides consultations for people who need advice on how to implement a good ketogenic diet.
Well, it sounds like your way of eating helped you with your glioblastoma multiforme. Yeah. It sounds like it helped you with your mental health issues, because that's what led you to drugs. Since you went from keto to carnivore, what do you think the benefits of each are? What do you like better?
I actually prefer eating meat. I mean, I've been experimenting with every so often. I eat raw meats. So I have liver, I have beef liver and beef muscle mass, and some fat, some butter, which I dip it into, and I find it very enjoyable. Whereas when I was vegetarian, the idea of that, I mean, still the idea of it makes me go a bit cringy. But because I'm so experienced at conquering my fears right now, it's like it doesn't matter. My fear of this does not matter. This isn't going to harm me. This is going to benefit me so much. The tumor came back a little bit more aggressively. And then when that happened, I actually went to a Children with Cancer conference in London, where I met Professor Seyfried in person. But I met a guy also called Misha Sakharov, and he's got this group. It's called Beat Brain Tumor. He's got his website, and basically he did a little video blog for his followers, and he said basically, I'm going to meet this person called Pablo Kelly, who's got the strongest willpower and he's got the greatest mindset in facing his cancer. So I met him, and he said to me, you know, I really want to say that if you ever have another problem with your brain tumor, please come to me, because I'm doing something different, something outside the box that no one's really doing. And he said, basically, I got the reoccurrence in 2018, just after my first child was born. And after that, I went, right, I'm calling Misha, because I need to understand what's going on here. And he said, basically, drop the supplements, because I was taking supplements, which I didn't mention. I was taking supplements at the beginning, being diagnosed by, getting blood tests, sending them to a place in Arizona, or North America, anyway. And they were saying, take this supplement. It was costing thousands of pounds that I didn't have. I actually fundraising for.
Wow.
And he basically said, I want you to drop the supplements. All you need is meat and bone broth and liver and organs. And I went, okay, really strict. I don't want this to grow anymore. And as soon as I did that, it stalled the tumor growth. It's like 4 centimeters, and it just stopped it from growing rapidly.
What I learned from people like you, Pablo, and Dr. Terry Walls, who stopped her multiple sclerosis, and Dr. Dannenberg, who's been on my show, and Guy Tenenbaum, who's been on my show, all these people that stop basically deadly situations like cancer, autoimmune, is they do go from keto to carnivore. So I feel like if we want to have the optimum diet, why wouldn't we emulate people like you?
It's our primal ancestors.
Can you tell us about your website and how you help people?
Yeah, so a while back, we were struggling so much for money, and someone suggested to me that I've got something. But before that, I was helping Misha Sakharov, the guy I was talking about. He's a Russian fellow who could speak 4 languages. He asked me to be an inspirational kind of part of his, because he does Q&As every day for his clients, where brain tumor buddies, basically we share our stories, we share our worries, we share our successes. And we said, can you be the example that they strive towards? So we were doing these Q&As, and I would take my own ones on Fridays, where I would be the sole the host. So at some point I decided, because I was so good at it and people were being inspired by me. I mean, there was a woman who declined standard of care. She sadly passed away 2 years later, but she said, before she died, she said, I'm glad I did this, because I got to live a quality of life with my family. I did so many things and I was happy. And that was down to you, Pablo. And I was like, well, I didn't expect that, because I was just doing what I felt was right at the moment. I can have one-to-one chats with people who, when I was diagnosed, I had no one to talk to, who had experienced a different path to chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and surgery. I had no one to talk to. All I had was anecdotal advice from ex-oncologists or doctors or people who had different types of cancer. I'm not trained in any way, but I've got the experience necessary to say, this is what worked for me. And you've got many choices ahead of you. You can also decline standard of care. It's a choice. Whatever you do is a choice, and it's either life or death. You got to strive for life. You can't strive for death. Because when you're told, oh, we don't know if you're going to survive this, you're probably going to die. People give up. They kind of go, what am I going to do? I'll just do what I'm told to do. I felt that people aren't being given all the information. Nutrition is not a part of the training of doctors. None of it is. they get about, was it a day's course where they learn a little bit about nutrition and food, and none of it is correct. It's based on the old science, which is flawed. So I give people my anecdotal evidence, which is me surviving past my sell-by date.
I wanted to ask you about studies you find interesting that we should know about.
To be honest, at the beginning, it was only a study about people with epilepsy, but this one is written about me, a follow-up of my survival, basically. Was it 7 years at the time? 7.5 years. It was Professor Seafried and a lot of other people I can see right there.
Because the theory based on the treatments is incorrect. It's a metabolic disease, and we can take charge of that. We actually can, we have the capability of modifying our risk for cancer, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, all of these things. Most of the risk factors for cancer are now controllable when you understand that it's a metabolic disease and not a genetic disease. Because people who think it's a genetic disease say, oh, it's my bad luck. That's incorrect. It's incorrect. The mutations are all downstream effects. They're not the cause. So we're focusing in almost the entire cancer industry is focusing on downstream epiphenomena, not the real problem. So in a nutshell, that's what it is. We published a lot of papers on this. The problem is it's a message that few people want to hear. Certainly the pharmaceutical companies don't want to hear it. Certainly the academic cancer industry does not want to hear it. And also the people, the population of people in our society are not really excited to hear about it. They'll roll the dice and say, oh no, I like to eat the way I am and I like to do what I like to do. I'm very comfortable and I'll roll the dice and maybe I won't get cancer. So, but they can take charge of it once you know how to manage it.
Experts in their field. And my story is pretty unique, but unfortunately, it's not being looked at by big science, big medical journals. Or I'm just lucky, according to my oncologist and according to my surgeon, a unique case. I mean, I do have one thing going for me. The IDH1 mutant gene blocks glutamine, which is another fuel source for cancer cells in the brain. And glutamine can be found in any food. And people say that when you get a carnivore, because you're eating so much meat, your uptake of glutamine is too much. But the thing is, when you use intermittent fasting or day fasts alongside that, and you're having 1.5 meals, 2 meals a day, you're not going to cause more inflammation. You're actually reducing it.
Okay. Oh, that's a
yeah. It's just yeah.
The other thing I wanted to share is you're writing a book. So if anyone wants to donate, can you tell us a little bit about your book and how this donation works?
This is another suggestion from my father-in-law. Because I've been doing my blog for a long time, and in fact, my book is going to be compiled as some of my blog posts because some of them are quite emotional. It shows my transition from despair to hope. So I want to write a book that is it's not about diet, it's not about nutrition, it's not about spirituality. It's about all of them mingled together. It's about my experience of it, which is understanding that life is confusing when you're not present with it. So every instance of bad news that's come along for me has kicked me into something that's better. I made the choice in my presence, in being aware of how I felt in the moment, to do something different. There's something that has actually helped me survive 8 years. So every time I had a negative input from the doctor, they said, oh, well, you've got 12 to 15 months. And I went, wait there, I can do something about this. I made the choice to find the solution. If you're always looking at the problem, you never find the solution. So there are no problems. There are only solutions.
Wow.
And that kind of stuck with me. If I'm always looking at the problem, I'll never see anything but the problem. And my fear will lead to my ultimate demise. And I said to myself, that just kind of stuck with me, that quote. And that quote has kind of guided my path on this. And I want to write this book to kind of share my feelings on this so that people can understand that there is always a solution. And if you're going to die, I'm aware that I could die, but I've accepted that death is a part of life. And I can't be afraid of something that's inevitable for all of us.
We all have a journey. So any book you open that's autobiographical, any person that you happen to ask their journey, they have trials and tribulations, and you've had a lot of them. We all have.
Yeah. In fact, there was an experience that's even greater than that. When I was 4 years old or so, when I was very young, we went to a river and there was a rock, and I was sat on the rock paddling my feet in, and we was next to some rapids, and everyone was busy, and they, I just disappeared. I slipped into the water.
Ooh.
But my memory of it is that it was crystal clear. There was no panic. I didn't know how to swim. So I was just floating peacefully in the water. And then I remember looking up and there was a splash. So my mum's boyfriend at the time, he dived in and he grabbed me. And I was struggling to stay in the water. And I was like, I've got to stay here. My only memory is that it's like this crystal clear memory that will never leave me, because it was peace. I could have died there, but I had no fear because there was no knowledge that water could harm me. I didn't need to breathe. My eyes were wide open. I could see clearly. And to be honest, that was one of my earliest memories of feeling good about life. And then someone came and took that away from me by diving into the water and dragging me out.
Well, that's a common story that I studied before I started nutrition for mental health. I was interviewing people that have, we call it an NDE, a near-death experience. And again, if you click below in my show, you'll see my friend Ryan, who had a near-death experience, my friend Daria, whose mother visited her after death in dreams for 4 or 5 months, that she knows they weren't dreams. So if I were to guess, I can't put words in your mouth, you were actually in kind of the dead zone. You were probably drowning, in the middle of drowning. And it's very common, someone having a heart attack or drowning, anything.
Yeah.
Once the doctor saves them, or the friend, they almost fight it. Why are you taking me out of this heavenly realm? In your case,
It's
it was
clairvoyance, isn't it? So the clarity, complete clarity.
Well, they have an awareness that you're pulling me back into this life, which is so hard, but here I am, I'm peaceful. There's no sound, there's no sunshine or darkness. It's all just a beautiful light. Sometimes they'll hear music or voices, or a grandparent will visit them. So I think you were in between worlds at that point, looking around, which normally doesn't happen. Water's not usually that clear. There's usually
no, I know it was rapid water as well. It should have been quite muddy. And
so I think you were partially, what I basically learned from that studies is it wasn't your time. You were meant to come back and go through this and speak to us now and write books and help people. And so I'm
told by many people. I mean, for some reason you're meant to be here, Pablo, and I'm like, well, I mean, I am here. So anyone can benefit from this. It's not unique to cancer patients. It's unique to our human body. It's just that we've been told from a corporate and greedy point of view that these foods that are now inherent in society are better for you. Margarine, there was a study done by someone who said basically margarine was butter and it was healthy fat. It was all a big lie. Raw would be the best way.
Okay.
Because then you get the bacteria, which is going to help your gut to heal. Raw butter, raw milk, raw cream, all of that really good stuff.
Thank you, Pablo. Really appreciate your help. And I'll put everything in the description so you can reach Pablo, and I'll put everything you need to reach out to me as well in the description. And thank you, Pablo. Thank you everyone for being here. I really hope you'll share this. Don't forget to share and of course, subscribe. And if you hit that little bell, then you'll be alerted when we have our next interview. So thank you for being here, everyone. And thank you, Pablo, for your time.
You're welcome. Yeah.